This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
At long last, the Women's World Cup is finally here for 2023. We're going to break down all things World Cup today by bringing back on Dr. Ed Feng, picking his brain on this year's field, what he thinks of USA, if he thinks they can do it for the third consecutive time, and much more to get you ready for what should be a fun couple of weeks of soccer. This is Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire, joined here as mentioned by Dr. Ed Feng. You can find his work over at thepowerrank.com and check him out on Twitter at thepowerrank. Ed, it is a delight to have you back on the show here for today. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. It's been a lot of fun looking into soccer from the women's perspective, and I think there's a lot of interesting things going on in the markets, and looking forward to talking about it.
I'm happy to hear that. I'm excited to hopefully lock in some bets as we get ready for the World Cup. The times of the games, not going to be able to, my bedtime does not allow me to watch most of these, but it'll still be a lot of fun to track it throughout the time as well. Fun to watch a good US team in action too. So no shade to the men's team, by the way, but fun to see a legitimate contender on the women's side here. We'll talk about the U.S. and talk about their prospects and much more. But Ed, it's been a while since we caught up. We last had you on, I think, around the NFL draft. So how's your summer been going?
Summer's been really good. Been working on football, obviously getting ready for everything going on at the Power Rank, at my new newsletter at thepowerrank.com. It's been a pretty fun summer with 5 Nugget Saturday. Really getting into prop bets.
Yeah,
I kind of started with the NBA and more so with baseball because my people who know a lot more than me tell me it's really hard to beat the money line. So really been looking at strikeout props there. That's been a ton of fun. Have some tools that I'm probably going to publicize a little bit more in the next coming weeks. So yeah, doing some new things over the summer, but also really focused on football and the 2023 season.
Interesting. I actually have a worse ROI on strikeout props than I do on money line. So you might need to combine forces here a bit so you can up my strikeout prop game. That's why we have Rob Freeman on Fridays, Pitching Ninja, to kind of, handle that street for me. Yeah. I don't know why, but for whatever reason, money lines have been more profitable for me this year.
Interesting.
Maybe it's variance, but who can say?
Yeah, no, I think it's a lot of variance. I mean, I've been probably seriously doing strikeouts for a couple weeks now. I definitely checked out Pitching Ninja and some of your shows when I was first getting started. And I don't know, strikeouts have been going really well. I think that is a lot of variance, but I also do think there's a lot of value. You can just kind of tell when these strikeout values oscillate a lot from game to game as pitchers get hot, pitchers get cold in the strikeout territory. I mean, it seems I think we would probably all agree that long run, you're going to find more value in props market than those primary markets. Same thing with NBA. I'd rather be betting a point prop than a spread. Yeah. I mean, I think it's an interesting opportunity, right? Because it's not I think there's still value in trying to attack the big props in some sense. I think strikeouts is probably a big prop. I think it's something that people would like to bet. And while there's value there, definitely looking to it. And it's just fun to think about something different and hopefully apply that to football in the fall.
And thinking about, how can we turn that into more niche prop markets? I've thought about converting my strikeout model into a walk model because at a lot of places you can bet walks as well. So, and it'd be just changing two things around. It would be very easy to convert the strikeout model into a walk model as well. So kind of giving that thought of, is this the proper market to use the tools I have and stuff like that. Right. It's a lot of fun for sure. Well, we're going to talk hopefully. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it kind of feels less exciting to bet walks though, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. It's way less exciting, which is why it's probably more profitable to do so.
Yeah, no, I kind of wonder about that. I mean, I think strikeouts are exciting, right? Because it's got the same kind of feel as points. It's a positive thing for the player, and that I feel always leads to value in the under, which is something we'll talk about a little bit later today in women's soccer. But I don't know. I mean, my goal always, especially with 5 Nugget Saturday, is to get people excited, get something something they want to bet on, and then, disappoint them because it's an under. But I think people get that if they read my stuff regularly.
Right.
I think I've had one over, in the last couple months on any prop. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's always like, when you're thinking about it from my perspective, it's kind of like this combination. Like, what can we find that is probably a little bit easier to find value, but still something that people really want to bet on?
Right.
And I just feel like also in the NBA, like, it's just a little bit easier to get excited about points than like points plus rebounds plus assists.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if that's not true, please someone email me, hit me up on Twitter and tell me. But that's kind of
my DFS brain likes the PRA just because like it translates so well from one to the other. But I think in general, people probably care. It's easier to think about points than it is other stuff. So I get that for sure. And I tried sizing the research around like 3-point shot attempts, the variance involved in all that. So I think there's a lot of overlap there too, which would probably make it easier for you. So we'll talk plenty of props. We're going to talk some college football with Ed in a couple weeks. We're going to talk some NFL with Ed this fall as well. But across the next month or so, we're going to be talking Women's World Cup here every week with Ed, getting his thoughts on this year's field, the U.S., and much more. We'll do that, get an overall view of the Women's World Cup here in just 1 second. But first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. Our preview of the Open Championship for golf is up via Brandon Gadula, breaking down his thoughts on the Open Championship at Royal Liverpool. Find that on the Covering the Spread podcast feed, on the FanDuel YouTube page, and over on FanDuel TV Plus. The U.S. women's soccer team is taking on the world, and you can take home bonus bets every time they win with FanDuel, because right now, new customers get $100 in bonus bets guaranteed, plus another $10 in bonus bets for every Team USA win. Sign up between now and August 3rd. Then place your first $5 bet to unlock your bonus bets. That way, you'll be all set to bet on everything from total goals to player props all tournament long. However you want to play, don't miss your chance to get $10 in bonus bets for every Team USA win, plus $100 in bonus bets guaranteed. Make every moment more with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. First online real money wager only. $10 deposit required. Refund issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire in 7 days. Restrictions apply. See full terms at FanDuel.com/sportsbook. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit FanDuel.com/RG in Massachusetts. Hope is here. GamblingHelplineMA.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support. In New York, 1-877-8 HOPE-NY, text HOPE-NY. In Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 533-42. In Connecticut, 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat. In Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. In Wyoming and Kansas, 1-800-522-4700 or visit Kansas or ksgamblinghelp.com. In Kansas, Louisiana is 1-877-770-STOP. In Maryland, mdgamblinghelp.org. And in West Virginia, go to 1-800-GAMBLER.net. Let's shift focus now and talk about the Women's World Cup, Ed, for 2023. And this is the first time we've talked women's international soccer on the show with you. So we've talked men's international soccer before, plenty. But are you able to take that same process you use in building out men's rankings and apply it over to the women's side of things as well?
Absolutely. And that's certainly where I started. On my site, I've had, men's international rankings for a long time. I take match results over a pretty significant period, like 4 or 5 years, use my algorithm that adjusts for strength of schedule. And this is particularly important in the international game when you really have sharks and minnows, right? You really have some really strong teams against some really weak teams. We'll talk about how the United States beat Vietnam 13-0 in the last World Cup. Things like that. You need to account for that. So when I adjust for strength of schedule, the strength of my algorithm is that it tends to de-weight those kinds of games. So for the women, went over and grabbed some data, went everything through the last World Cup, which was 2019. Took all major competitions since then. So this would include Euro for the women, Copa America in South America, North American competitions, and all the major and the Olympics too, because the women send their top teams to the Olympics as well. Put those together and cranked out some numbers, had some results. The United States is first, England is second, so pretty much looks close to what you expect the favorites to be in the markets. So yes, you can apply the same strategy that you do for the men to the women for the international game. I do think there are some insights in there. I also did this for XG. You can get XG data for the last World Cup. You can get XG data for Euro in 2022. So that's good because a lot of the prime contenders are the United States and teams from Europe. And so you can do that as well. Obviously, you got to be cautious there because you have a limited amount of data in a small number of games. And XG is great, but XG is far from perfect. You can do all those things. And then the debate was, okay, do I want to make that model better? Do I want to include friendlies in there? Do I want to go all out and calculate the win probabilities like I do for the men, probability to get out of the group? And the answer I came up was no. There are just a rash of injuries across all major teams. In fact, the only two contenders I can find that aren't suffering from significant injuries and absences are Germany and Sweden. United States is missing players like Mallory Swanson, who's been a big-time goal scorer for them in the past. France is missing one of their top scorers as well. It seems like there is an ACL epidemic in women's soccer, which is kind of sad. It's taking out a lot of the top players. Some of the top English women who won Euro not too long ago have retired. There's some drama in the Spanish Federation because some of the women don't want to play for the coach. So it's kind of a mess. So I decided not to perfect that model and to look at some other sources to kind of complement the calculations that I'm doing.
So basically what you have is a baseline based on your numbers, based on running those numbers and adjusting for schedule, but then you can tweak in your brain kind of teams up and down based on injuries. Is that kind of what you're doing here?
Kind of. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think kind of everyone goes down except for Germany and Sweden, honestly. Yeah. And then you kind of have to, and I honestly don't know the rosters that well. The idea is that the US is deep enough that they should be able to put out a pretty good squad even without three of their top players. Should France be able to do that? Probably. Can Spain account for some of their absences? Well, the market thinks so because they're one of the favorites. But yeah, I think what it made me do was to kind of consult two other sources. So the first of those is actually the FIFA rankings. And I know I often make fun of rankings like FIFA, but actually a long time ago, I learned that they actually do a good job with the FIFA women's rankings. They use goals and goal differential when they do the updates after every match. And so it ends up being really similar to what I do for college football. And that college football model I've actually found to be more accurate than some of the other things that I used to do that took season-long data and adjusted for strength of schedule. So the FIFA women's rankings are actually really good. They have the United States first, not much of a surprise, but they have Germany and Sweden second and third, which I think is super interesting. They have all the other contenders where they should be, and it's going to account for what these teams have done more recently. So it's going to be a little bit more on top of, how these European teams did in qualifying. And it's definitely a resource that I go to. And then finally, I've been looking at a lot of player rankings. Just to try to figure out, who has a lot of players out there, who kind of checks the boxes in terms of elite players playing at top clubs. United States certainly does. Although it's interesting because a lot of the U.S. women still play in the U.S. And I'm not exactly sure how to compare that to like a Barcelona who won the Champions League in Europe. It really seems like Barcelona has every top woman in Europe, it's still challenging to figure that out. And so I think it'll be interesting to kind of watch these games and see how the players perform. And it's a little bit of a referendum on U.S. soccer versus in Europe. I mean, for the men, we clearly know that Europe is better, but what is it for the women?
So let's talk about that and talk about the market here, because right now the U.S. is the favorite to win their third consecutive World Cup. They are a plus 240 at FanDuel Sportsbook. England is plus 430. Let's talk about the USA portion of that first. Actually, England just lengthened. They're now plus 550. Spain is plus 470. Now second in those. But as you mentioned before, the FIFA rankings are a bit different. Let's talk about the U.S. side of that first. Plus 240, Ed. Do you think they deserve to be effectively in a tier of their own for the Women's World Cup?
I think so. The women have certainly earned the respect. I mean, they've had a really good squad. They have the World Cup victories to prove it. The numbers all have them as the top team in the world, so I certainly think they deserve to be the favorite. The numbers also suggest that the margin is not that big from the U.S. to like England and France and other teams that were very competitive in the last World Cup. If I'm not mistaken, I believe that the U.S. won the last World Cup, but the XG was really close, and I think they were actually behind England and France when they played in the semifinal final. So it's not like we expect the U.S. women to be minus 110 favorites, right? U.S. versus the field kind of thing. It's a lot more even now. The rest of the world is catching up. And I don't have any problem with the U.S. being the favorite. I don't really have any interest in that number, but it should be competitive.
So the U.S. not in a tier of its own. Does that to you mean there is value anywhere else in the market looking at potentially healthier teams, whatever it may be right now?
Yeah, honestly, like I really like the healthy teams. I like Germany and Sweden. I think there's value in Germany plus 750. Sweden still 18-1.
They are indeed, yes.
Yeah, I really, like I mentioned, they're second and third in the FIFA rankings. They're also really high in my numbers. I think simply the health is really going to benefit them. So I mean, those are the two teams I would go to in the futures market.
So the FIFA rankings have Germany and Sweden higher as a result of the health, and it sounds like you're valuing those. Where did those teams kind of settle in if we're not accounting for health? You're looking at your rankings before you factor in the health stuff. Were they still pretty high up there and then are just kind of benefiting from that bump after that point?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Germany was third in my numbers, so certainly not too bad. They were fourth in XG and they should have that's going to be a better estimate for Germany just because you have data from them from both the World Cup and Euro. Sweden was sixth when I look at goal difference, so that would be my numbers, and then sixth in XG. So they also check those boxes there as well. And they also have like top players in the world. When you kind of scan some of these top lists of players, there's a core of players from both teams that end up on those lists and are healthy and are going to be at the World Cup.
So Germany plus 750 and Sweden plus 1800, both potential good futures outlets as a result of their health relative to what other teams are dealing with as of right now. Let's stay focused on Team USA here and talk about their first match. They're taking on Vietnam, and Ed, their money line is minus 20,000. Yikes. So I'm going to go ahead and guess. We're not talking about that, but when you look at them taking on Vietnam, this game is on Friday. Anything stand out to you in that game right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So the U.S. won 13-0 again over Vietnam in the last World Cup. And so that immediately suggested let's look at the total goals, right? And when it's 13-0, it kind of suggests an over, right? So if you look at go to over under 6.5 goals, it's pretty much even, right? So the total is 6.5 goals. That's just too much. When you go back to the last World Cup, that U.S. Vietnam game was the only game the total to go over 6 goals. So the idea is that it's really hard to score goals at the international level. That the U.S. is unlikely to have a performance similar to the last World Cup. Obviously, probably not getting too much help from Vietnam in terms of scoring goals. I do like the under here. One thing that you can do, you can actually look at the Spain-Costa Rica game, which has a similar money line. And you can see that their over-under for goals is more like 5.5 or 4.5.
Yeah.
It's not quite the same. So I think 6.5 goals is a lot. If you want to bet on the U.S. game, I think go under 6.5 goals.
The Spain-Costa Rica game to outline what that is. If you go to the 5.5 goals, the under for them is minus 174. The Spain money line in that game is the exact same as the U.S. one. So it sounds kind of as if, Ed, that 13-0 matchup is going to play a massive, massive factor in driving that total up for that one match.
I certainly think that's the case. Of course, anytime that you recommend an under in a game like this, you are opening yourself to look like a complete fool because it's not out of the question that 10-0 happens.
Sure.
But I do think under is the way to go here.
So, and the thing about that is you're not betting, an average. The average could be above 6.5 because there are situations in which 13-0 happens. You're betting a median. And if the median, if it goes under 6.5 goals more than 52% of the time, then that's a profitable bet. And based on the data we had from the last World Cup, like you were saying, where they're typically low scoring, it seems like the odds that it goes under 6.5, even in a very slanted game, seem to be pretty high. Even looking at similar games, like you said, that is a big number. So as you said, Ed, unders, not the most fun thing to bet. They can definitely make your heart beat a little bit if the U.S. gets out to like a 3-0 lead right away. But money's fun, right?
Yeah, no, it is fun. I mean, obviously the sweat is a little different from an under because you're just sitting there the whole game being like, all right, please take your foot off the gas, U.S., which probably doesn't happen.
Right.
But I still like under 6.5 goals here.
And that game is actually at a reasonable time too. It's at 9:00 Eastern. So that one I actually can watch, which is not as, I prefer to bet unders when I can't watch it and I can wake up the next morning, see how it went, feel good about it. But, I think it'll be a good way to get some action on that US versus Vietnam game to open things up. Let's talk about the futures market too, Ed, here, because we did talk about like the actual, to win the World Cup futures, but there are a lot of other futures. There are some player futures as well here, groups, whatever it may be. Looking at the other futures beyond just the outright winner market, where are you seeing value right now?
Yeah, I think the Golden Boot is kind of interesting. So there's two U.S. women that are, the favorites. Alex Morgan is 34 years old. She's been around a while. When I learned that she was 34 years old, I was kind of like, whoa, I'm old.
Yeah, same.
Because I remember the young new thing on the U.S. women's national team. So I don't know. Is she effective as she used to be and going to be the Golden Boot? Maybe. I'm not sure that there's too much value in those two. Sam Kerr is widely considered the best women's player in the world. Whether you look at like the salary she gets paid in England, you look at some of these rankings of players. She's always at the top. It's also interesting. She's at home. She's Australian. So there's a lot kind of going on there. But, her odds are lower because she's probably not going to get as many matches as the U.S. women, right? Australia is not expected to go as far. They're plus 900 to win, which means, they're probably a stretch to see them get all the way to the semis, and certainly less likely than the U.S. I actually really do. I haven't bet it yet, but I've been thinking about betting Alexandra Popp, who is Germany's top scorer, 16-1. Expect a Germany team to make it pretty far, at least the semifinal. Pretty decent shot of making the semifinal. And she's going to be their top goal scorer. This is a woman that probably has about the same goal rate as Alex Morgan in international matches, and probably faces more difficult competition playing in Europe there. If you want to have some fun. I think that's one I would go with. And honestly, like 10-1 on Sam Kerr is probably not. It would also be fun as well.
Alexandra Popp is 16-1 right now over at FanDuel Sportsbook to win the Golden Boot, and it does correlate well with your Germany outright because you're expecting them to exceed market expectations there, which does correlate to this. More games means more shots at goals, stuff like that. But also, it sounds like you view Popp as being like the top goal scorer on Germany. So if they score, she's benefiting more. Whereas, maybe Morgan has more competition on the US side of things as well. So it sounds like there are a couple benefits of Popp that we may not find at shorter odds.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I do think she's the primary scorer. Actually, go down a little bit. Like with the US, it looks like you can see Trinity Rodman also is on this list. That's Dennis Rodman's daughter.
Nice.
And I cannot wait to watch her play to see if you can see anything of her father in her play, which I think would be kind of hilarious. But I think the U.S. women, even without Marilyn Ray Swanson, looks like they have a lot of women up there that are going to potentially score a lot of goals. I would go with a woman from another nation that also has a chance of going deep. Should also probably score a lot of goals.
And again, it ties in with our other bets too. So that's always going to be a comforting thing where the market, if it's off in one area, it can be off in multiple areas, and kind of finding the spots where you can benefit from those errors is beneficial. Got a lot of games, Ed. They're starting Thursday morning, actually, with the first matches. So looking at matches, anything stand out to you? Teams that may be undervalued? Any markets you want to bet right now?
I'm not looking to bet kind of these matches until a little bit later. You can tell from these odds that they're pretty lopsided.
Yeah.
And, it's not, when it tends to be two even teams, I'm going to go through and use my numbers to calculate what the win probability should be. And I think that'll give you kind of a decent estimate. And you can kind of apply what you see and actually watching these matches to figure out if there's value. As of right now, I'm not really interested in minus 20,000 for the US or Spain to win. I mean, I'm not quite interested in that right now. I certainly will, like, when there are competitive games. I mean, certainly as we get into the quarterfinals, these games will get very competitive. The odds will be pretty even, and that's when I want to pounce. But I'll probably put some of these predictions in my newsletter in 5 Nuggets Saturday. But in terms of betting it, I'm going to wait a little bit.
And I think the other benefit too is you can kind of test your numbers. You can see the numbers that you have. Are they performing well? Are they meeting expectations here? And you can decide, okay, I've got more confidence in my numbers now since we get to those matches that might be a bit more highly contested. I feel like getting more data in there, allowing yourself to test your model with your eyes. I feel like that's another benefit of potentially holding off. You're not just betting into like these massive markets, but also you can actually tell whether or not the numbers you have value relative to the market.
Exactly. And I'm interested to see exactly how the numbers tend to work out.
Yeah, I am as well. It's going to be a fun tournament to track. As mentioned, we're going to be talking about this every week with Ed, getting his read on the markets, talking Team USA, and much more. So to get those chats as they go live, make sure you're subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcast. If you like what you hear, leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And also do not forget to check us out on the FanDuel YouTube page or on the FanDuel TV Plus app on Amazon Fire, Apple TV, or Roku. Ed, been a blast to talk to you once again. If people want to find 5 Nuggets Saturday, if they want to find anything else you got cooking over at the Power Rank, where can they do so?
Check me out at thepowerrank.com. Certainly, a lot of the best stuff is in the newsletter. With 5 Nuggets Saturday, like right now, I can guarantee on Saturday there'll be a strikeout prop in there. Right now, since the NBA season ended, I've been throwing some football futures in, which is not my favorite thing to do because it obviously you can't cash that ticket over the weekend, which is I don't know. I would prefer that you cash some tickets and want to come back and read the newsletter the next Saturday. So, and then I definitely talk about analytics and obviously in the middle of getting ready for football season. And in the newsletter, I also have a preview series for both college football and NFL. So check that out at thepowerrank.com.
All righty. And find Ed on Twitter at the Power Rank as well. I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. Want to thank you all for tuning in. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow, talking some MLB futures, and I'll talk the Hungarian Grand Prix and talk some NASCAR as well. We'll talk to all of you then. This has been Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.